Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
Very good afternoon to you. This hour,
I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States, just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history.
As the Italian Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci noted in 1930, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. The old world, summed up by the very people Trump was addressing at Davos, have been listening to the worldview of a very different, very confrontational, not particularly settled version of a new order. A new world, which in this hemisphere means American power is the beginning and the end of the conversation.
I realized in that conversation that the United States is keeping the whole world afloat. But I realized that without us, it's not Switzerland anymore. Without us, it's not any of the countries that are represented here.
Whether that is military power or economic power, what the shining city on the hill wants, it gets, because the man running it is playing on a truth. The truth that America has been relied upon by Europe in a way that has denuded Europe of now much needed degrees of autonomy. Every American president since JFK has been making the point about NATO contributions, but Trump seems to be following through in an entirely disruptive way. It was the threat to end US support for NATO that Theresa May just about managed to nullify in the first meeting he had with the UK Prime Minister back in 2017. But the issue of Greenland has put that loose agreement right back on the table. The good news this afternoon is that Trump ruled out using the military to take Greenland, but is still using US economic power to force a negotiation on buying it.
All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built. We're building a golden dome.
We need it for world defence, he says, which kind of makes you wonder who we're defending the world from. But then again, when the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born, now is the time of monsters. Does Greenland have a price? Starmer says he will not yield on his principles that Greenlanders should have sovereignty, and he, of course, is right. But how much of a price do you want to pay for that principle? 10% tariff from next month? 25% from the summer? 30%? 35%? Does Greenland have a price? Should Greenland have a price? Is real estate actually realpolitik? Simon Marks is LBC's Washington correspondent. Simon, decode that.
Well, Tom, I think it's really important to underscore that while the headline writers are correctly all reporting that Donald Trump said that he doesn't want to use military force to seize Greenland, I'm not sure that's entirely the same as Donald Trump taking the military threat off the table, because no sooner had he said, I don't want to use force, than he immediately drew the attention of his audience in Davos to the fact that the United States has, he says, the most powerful military on the planet and is commissioning new battleships that he described in great detail that are going to be 100 times more powerful than those that were used during World War II. He even said to his audience there in Davos, just think about that. And I think he wanted them to think about that in a manner that connected the expression of might is right to the issue of Greenland. Now, he says that he wants immediate negotiations about acquiring the territory. That is very different than what his own Vice President and Secretary of State committed to last week in discussions with the Danish Foreign Minister and the Greenlandic Foreign Minister here in Washington. They agreed to set up a working group with the Danes and the Greenlandic authorities to see if any common ground was possible to identify between the US and Europe. They never agreed to set up a working group to talk about the process of acquisition. And the other extraordinary thing that really struck me, and there was so much of it in that speech, but you know, this claim by President Trump that Greenland is part of North America America. It's our territory. This complete retelling of World War II history, that somehow Greenland was American at the end of World War II, and presumably either FDR or Harry Truman made the great mistake, presumably Harry Truman in his mind, of giving it back to the Danes. But this idea that it's our hemisphere, this is our territory, is an extraordinary assertion that European leaders are going to have to find a way of trying to disabuse him of.
It's also partially, of course, Simon, the same kind of argument that Putin would deploy about why it's necessary that Ukraine becomes Russian again.
Yeah, and it's interesting you raise Vladimir Putin, because Donald Trump keeps saying, and he said it again in this speech, that if the United States doesn't acquire Greenland or take it into America's aegis, the Russians and the Chinese are going to come in and they're going to seek to control Greenland. That despite the fact that the Danes say there hasn't been a single Chinese naval vessel spotted in the waters off Greenland in a decade. But what is so extraordinary about this is that Russia is egging him on. They're telling him they think it's a great idea for the United States to acquire Greenland. Now, why would Russia be doing that if they had territorial designs on this piece of ice? I mean, the other aspect of all of this, of course, were the not-so-veiled threats to the NATO alliance that was contained in this speech, which was also, in broader terms, a speech in which Donald Trump was urging Europeans to get behind political parties that are going to do for the UK, for France, for Germany, for countries all over the continent, exactly what he's done for the United States. And that comes back to the national security strategy and its thumbs up for patriotic European parties, by which, of course, in the UK, Donald Trump means reform.
Simon, appreciate it as always. Thank you so much. Simon Marks is LBC's Washington correspondent.